Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. We are about to begin the 2053 postseason, and it was an incredible season for the Rockies, at least during the regular season. 113 wins, so one of the biggest win totals in baseball history for the Rockies. Pretty much everything that could go well for the Rockies did go well this year. You can see we won the NL West by 29 games over the Dodgers. So that was pretty crazy. Obviously have the best record in baseball. As I noted in our last episode, though, near the end of it, having an incredible number of wins hasn't historically been a path to World Series success in Major League Baseball. The Rockies are now the sixth team in Major League history with over 110 wins in a season. And only one of those previous five teams has won the World Series, the 1998 Yankees, who had 114 wins when they won the first of their three in the row, the second of their 4 in 5 years. But the other 110 plus win or 111 plus win teams include the 1906 Cubs and the 2001 Mariners, who both won 116 games. Neither of them won the World Series. And then it also includes the 1954 Cleveland Indians and last year's 2022 Los Angeles Dodgers, who both won 111 games and neither won the World Series. So the Rockies are clearly hoping to join the Yankees as world champions with more than 110 wins in a regular season. Clearly, although the past history is not with us, after a season like this, anything less than a championship would be a bitter disappointment. And we feel that the team is ready and in pretty good shape as we wait out the wild card series to find out who we're going to be facing in the NLDS. And taking a look at the full standings before we begin the playoffs, you can see that the Nationals are the second seed in the National League. We were 14 games ahead of them, and we were 10 games ahead of the White Sox for the best record in baseball. Also just wanted to check in on a couple of familiar names that I saw on the leaderboard over in the American League. Rich Gilboa, who was a number one overall pick that we talked about many seasons ago at this point, had another real big season leading the AL in runs and hits. You can see that over the course of his career, which is only 11 years, he's been an incredible player, led the league in hits 6 times at this point, and already closing in on 2,200 hits at the age of 32 with a .331 career batting average and 5 batting titles. So his career has been everything you would have hoped for out of a number one overall pick. Another guy to check in on who had a great year was Andres Erritzeri. You may remember him. He was our ace when we took over this Colorado team, and we had him in 2049, but he was due to make a ton of money, and he was already fragile at that point, and he was in his mid-30s, so we felt like it made sense to move on from him. But you can see he's had pretty good success away from Colorado the last 4 years. Started at least 31 games a year, led the AL in wins a year ago, and a brilliant season this year, leading the league in ERA, WHIP, walks per 9, strikeout to walk ratio, and FIP minus. That said, he is out with a herniated disc right now, going to be out for another week, so it looks like the White Sox will have him back for their playoff run, hopefully, because they will be having a first-round bye also, obviously. And then the last player to check in on the leaderboard is Isaiah Hill. You may remember him as the great player we had for 7 years of our playthrough in Pittsburgh. He became a player that we just could not afford to keep. Dodgers signed him to a huge 3-year contract. The Yankees have subsequently signed him since. He has continued on a path towards Cooperstown. You can see he's going to turn 38 next month. But clearly has put together a Hall of Fame resume at this point. 2,700 hits, 644 homers, 1,870 ribbies, batting average close to 300. He just led the American League in runs batted in with 133 this year. And to put the level of dominance and consistency of his career into perspective, he's never played fewer than 150 games in a season. He's hit over 30 home runs every year in his career, and he's driven in 110 or more runs every year of his career. So he has had a fantastic career, and looks like, based on his abilities and his performance this year, probably has another 2 or 3 years of pretty high-level production ahead of him to likely get to 2,000 runs batted in, 3,000 hits, and probably 700 homers. But enough with the nostalgia. It's time to think about what's going to happen over the next 3 or 4 weeks of this postseason. And we've figured out a potential 26-man playoff roster. One pitcher who's not going to make the team is Sal Lofton, who we saw at the end of our last episode. We were waiting for injury diagnosis on him, and it turned out to be pretty serious. A torn elbow ligament that's going to keep him out for 10 to 11 months. He was a player we picked up right at the trade deadline with Boston. Thought he could help bolster our bullpen. Really didn't work out, quite honestly. He pitched 21 and a third innings, allowing 28 hits, 5.48 ERA, whip of $1.50. His Sierra was much better, and he seemed to have the tendencies with his movement, ground ball tendencies, and ground baller pitcher type that would have played well in Colorado, but it didn't really work out. He's a free agent after this year, so given the injury, unlikely that he will be back with us next season. And after checking in on one of the 4 players we traded for, might as well check in on the other 3 that we picked up closing in on the trade deadline. Picked up starting pitcher Gus Duran right after Rogelio Loera was lost for the season, our ace starter. Haven't asked Duran to be our number 1 starter. He's been more of a 3 or 4 guy for us, and he's gone 7-2 with a 3.49 ERA over 69 and 2/3 innings pitched, 3.44 Sierra, a WAR of 2.4 in just 12 games. So he has definitely been productive, and will certainly, along with Alvarado, Ortega, and Vasquez, be a member of our starting rotation in the postseason. The other 2 players that we picked up were shortstop Israel Mays. Thought that he could give us a little more offense out of the shortstop position, while also giving us solid, well above average, but not exceptional defense at the position. Offensively, he's been even better than we could have hoped. Hit 343 with a crazy 22 doubles in 169 at-bats. So he was very productive for us. Not quite as productive, but still useful, Demetrius Washington, the veteran infielder, taken over as our second baseman most of the time. He hit 273 in 176 at-bats with 14 doubles, 3 triples, 8 home runs, well above average OPS plus and WRC plus, and also pretty solid defense, playing mostly at second base, but also some third base for us. So 3 of the 4 additions have been good. Clearly, Lofton did not work out, but it is what it is. Taking a look at our pitching staff for the playoffs, already mentioned the 4-man rotation that we're going to go with: Alvarado, Vasquez, Duran, and Ortega. We've taken some hits in the comments from our last episode about our closer position. What we're going to end up doing is our 5th starter, Javi Toledo. When we moved him into the bullpen, our manager wanted him to be in that role. Certainly think that Toledo, with the extreme ground ball tendencies, throwing in the mid-90s, and excellent movement on his pitches, should be even more effective as our closer than he was as a starter this year, with a 4.20 ERA and a 13-7 record pitching in Colorado. Certainly has been more than respectable as a starting pitcher. We had signed Tawase Adebamge in free agency this year for almost $13 million a year, thinking that he could be our closer. And he saved 35 games and had a long save streak at one point, but clearly a 5.21 ERA and a 3.43 BABIP. Probably not optimal for a closer. More recently, we've had the youngster Elijah Smith in that role over the last week or two of the season. You can see that he split this year between AA, AAA, and the majors. Hasn't given up a run at the major league level yet, with 13 strikeouts in 7 innings. And Chase Crawford is one other guy who has closed for us occasionally in the past, who could move into that role. But we're going to go into the playoffs with good thoughts and good intentions, and the complete expectation that Javi Toledo is going to pitch to form as far as his pitching ratings, and a former 20-game winner just a couple seasons ago, expecting good things from him this postseason. Taking a look at the everyday lineups, we've got an embarrassment of riches in the infield now, with Fields, Moore, Ruiz, Washington, Ortega, Casares, and Myers. All of those guys are going to be in starting roles one way or another against righties or lefties. Really, the only guys who won't be getting regular starting time are our backup catcher, Chris Rodriguez, and the young outfielders, Angel Gomez and Hector Rivera. Only issue right now is that Bobby Perez has forearm stiffness for 5 days. The young right fielder had a pretty big year for us, although he hit just 241. He led the NL with 126 runs, 39 homers, 86 runs driven in, put up a 4.4 WAR on the season. So clearly would prefer to have him back with the 5-day injury if the timing on that is accurate. I think the worst case scenario is he might miss game 1 of our series if the wild card series are pretty quick, but could have him back and healthy, hopefully even for game 1 of the NLDS. And after taking a look at the potential playoff tree, we will be facing either the 85-win Cardinals or the 85-win Brewers, who are both wild cards out of the NL Central in the second round of the playoffs, the NLDS. Just a quick look through our season. You can see the White Sox were plus 194 in run differential, and our Rockies were plus 344. So we were almost a run a game better than the second best team in all of baseball. So again, although the history of teams with this many wins closing the deal and winning the World Series is not great, anything other than that is going to be a bitter disappointment. And we will see how the playoffs go right now. And the Cardinals, the Marlins, and the Yankees all swept their wild card series. The Twins took out the Blue Jays 2-1. So we've got a AL Central matchup in one ALDS bracket. We've got an AL East matchup with the Yankees and the Red Sox. We've got an NL East matchup with the Nationals and the Marlins. And then we've also got our Rockies from the NL West against the NL Central St. Louis Cardinals. And obviously we are going to have home field advantage for as long as we are alive and well in the playoffs. You may remember from when we won the World Series last season, we went 9-0 at home, and we were only 2-5 on the road as we made our way to the first World Series championship that we had with these Rockies. So certainly going to be pivotal, I think, to continue winning at home. The team is completely healthy. We checked in on Bobby Perez, and his health is back to 100%. He's recovered from that forearm strain, so we have the roster that we'd like to have for this series. And you can see we should be pretty big favorites against the Cardinals. We went 6-1 against them this year. We were first in the NL in runs scored with over 1,000, third in runs against, while the Cardinals were tied for 7th in runs scored and 9th in runs against. We've got our ace, Dave Alvarado, on the mound. Has a nice 5-pitch arsenal plus a very poor changeup, but an extreme ground baller, throws really hard, great movement on his pitches, exactly the type of pitcher we want in Colorado. And you can see he's been pretty successful for us over the season since we made him a free agent acquisition in our first off season with the team and the cornerstone of our pitching staff, with the exception of last season when we had Rogelio Loera on board, and early this year before Loera suffered that significant injury. And we're going to be going up against a familiar name, Stephen Moore. 9-13 this year, did lead the National League with 34 games started. But this is a pitcher who was part of our pitching staff our first 2 years with the Rockies, 2049 and 2050, and obviously had came up through the system. You can see he put up a 6.75 ERA his last season with us, at which point we traded him midway through the year and moved on. Looks like he's gotten a little better over time, but certainly with his neutral ground ball, fly ball tendency and somewhat less movement on his pitches than we see from Mr. Alvarado, would certainly think that we have the advantage in the pitching matchup here in Game 1. And if you were watching last episode, you know that from the Cardinals, Manny Fernandez was close to a Triple Crown this year. Led the league with a .353 batting average and 150 ribbies. But our Elijah Moore hit 61 home runs and just edged him out there, but would think that Fernandez is likely going to be the most valuable player of the National League. Another familiar name, Andrew Booker, another former Cardinal who we traded away in 2050. He was a younger player who was wrecked physically, and you can see he had been reasonably productive while we had him in Colorado, but just didn't want to deal with the ups and downs of trying to keep a player with a lot of physical issues in the lineup. And you can see he's played 120, or he started 122, 108, and 51 games for the Cardinals since he went over there. Hasn't been nearly as effective offensively. He also wasn't the best influence in the clubhouse, which is another reason we moved on from him when we could. But we'll see what happens in Game 1. Obviously, the hope is to get this series off to a good start. And a 5-2 win for the Rockies. Does look like Alvarado outpitched Moore. Got a save from Javi Toledo, so that's good to see. Home run from Demetrius Washington. So a good start to the series. You can see we scored runs in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th to take a 5-0 lead. Cardinals did come back with a run in the 7th and a run in the 9th, but looks like they never got too close to us. 3 runs driven in, including that home run from Demetrius Washington. Looking at Alvarado, scattered 6 hits and a walk while striking out 9 over 6 2/3. Elijah Smith is no longer perfect as a major leaguer. Gave up a run, which was earned in an inning and a third of work with 3 hits. Did strike out 3, but probably good to have the rookie work through the postseason jitters. And then Javi Toledo did come on to pick up the save, struck out 2 and allowed a hit in his inning pitched. So a nice start to this playoff series for the Colorado Rockies. And as we get ready for Game 2, would love to put a stranglehold on this series. Jose Vasquez on the mound, 13-7, 4.12 ERA. Picked him up in a big trade with San Diego almost 2 years ago, and he has been a solid middle to back of the rotation starter for us. Not surprisingly, another extreme ground baller, really good movement on his pitches. Still gave up 19 homers in 179 and a third innings this year, but that was actually significantly improved from his first season with the Rockies. Going up against Willie Arambola. 11-12 this year with a 4.92 ERA for the 35-year-old veteran. Does have tendencies where you think he could be pretty effective in Colorado. He's also an extreme ground baller. Pretty good movement on his pitches. Looks like a pretty good pitching matchup, but on paper would certainly think that it still favors our Rockies. And we do get a 6-0 victory. So got home runs from center fielder Eddie Farley and DH Adam Fields. Vasquez got the W, obviously. Take a quick look at the box score. Once again, jumped out to an early lead with 4 runs in the 3rd. Tacked on 2 in the 8th. Only allowed 3 hits total. We got the home runs, as I mentioned, from Fields and Farley. Demetrius Washington followed up his homer yesterday with a triple today, doubles from Elijah Moore and Bobby Perez. So good number of extra base hits there. Have been playing Jordan Casares back at shortstop, given the better defense that he provides. Had an error in this game, which obviously was not preferred. But Vasquez was definitely dominant. 8 1/3 innings, 3 hits, 2 walks. Looks like he got a little gassed there at the end, or maybe took him out when he was approaching 100 pitches, although we don't have a pitch count on him. But regardless, Victor Fields came in, pitched 2/3 of an inning, allowing a walk and striking 1 out. 13 pitches to close things out. Bad news that Bobby Perez was injured while running the bases. Pending a diagnosis on him. Hopefully it's nothing too serious, because that would definitely be a big loss for our lineup if we lose Mr. Perez. And I guess things certainly could have been worse. Bobby Perez strained back, going to be day-to-day for about 5 days. Minimal impact on hitting and throwing, moderate impact on running. We'll probably try to take him out of the lineup today and just hope that we win this game and then we get a few days off between now and a potential NLCS. Take a look at the pitching matchups. We've got Gus Duran, who, as we've talked about, we picked up right before the trade deadline from Cleveland to bolster the depth and quality of our starting rotation. And he'll be going for us on the road in St. Louis against Dan Capers, 32-year-old, pretty solid pitcher, although he's wrecked physically at this point. Split the year between Syracuse in AAA and the Mets, and then I guess the Mets let him go, and he was a minor league free agent signing by the Cardinals. So he did do well for them, 3-2 with a 3.58 ERA in the 5 games he started, but bit surprising to see a player who was kind of picked up off of the scrap heap starting for a team in Game 3 of the playoffs. Going to be going against the right-hander, so that, or he is a right-hander, so that makes the fact that we're probably not going to play Bobby Perez hurt a little bit more, simply because Bobby Perez is one of the few left-handed bats in our everyday lineup, along with Adam Fields, switch-hitting catcher Alex Alvarez, and then the shortstop Jordan Casares. So definitely going to take a little hit not having Perez around. That said, it will give us an opportunity, I think, to shift things around a little bit as far as our lineup and likely get Israel Mays some action, which will not be the worst thing in the world. And unfortunately, as we were kind of trying to shift things around, right field defensively, because Perez is out there so often, was an area that we didn't feel like we had a perfect answer at. Danny Ruiz was the guy we could have shifted over there, but you can see, although his outfield skills are more than adequate to play the position, he just hasn't played it very much. Didn't want to risk our defense. So we're actually going to give the youngster, Hector Rivera, who is a proven right fielder, the opportunity to play. Gives us another left-handed bat in the lineup against a right-handed pitcher. Gives us incredible outfield defense with his 70 range in right field, Eddie Farley's 75 range in center field, and then Robbie Carrillo's 60 range in left field. Definitely feel like we've got a good defensive setup, and at least it gives us another left-handed bat in the lineup. So we will see if we can close out the Cardinals here with Gus Duran going up against Dan Capers in Game 3. And we did get the win, 3-0 win. So 2 straight shutouts by the Rockies. Overall in the series, we outscored the Cardinals 14-2 in the 3 games. Duran with the win. Toledo picks up his second save. Demetrius Washington with the MVP. Take a quick look at the box scores. Scored a run in the first to, again, get an early lead. 2 more in the 8th. And took care of business. Couple runs driven in from Robbie Carrillo, one from Elijah Moore, double from Demetrius Washington. So over the course of the 3-game series, he hit for the cycle. I guess that counts for something. Geron, excellent, 6 hits and 1 walk over 8 innings. Toledo came on, wasn't perfect, gave up a hit and a walk in his 1 inning. Didn't allow a run to score, though, and he actually hit a batter also. So it wasn't the most impressive performance, but he got the job done. And our Colorado Rockies are off to the NLCS. And you can see right now the Nationals are ahead of the Marlins 2-0. So definitely could be a matchup between the 2 best teams in the National League, and the White Sox and the Red Sox, who were the 2 best teams in the AL in the regular season, also have 2-0 leads. So so far it is all chalk here in the division series in both leagues. Oh, and just one other thing I wanted to check on, the youngster Hector Rivera, who we put in the lineup due to the injury, 0 for 4 with 4 left on base. So was not the greatest playoff debut for him in terms of being a starting player, but hopefully he will have many more opportunities in the years to come in the playoffs. In some disappointing news, Bobby Perez has suffered a setback. Going to be at least 4 days till he's ready to bounce back from that strained back muscle. So going to weaken us a little bit, at least for the early games of this series against the Nationals. But those are the things that you have to deal with when you're trying to make a playoff run. Everyone's not going to be 100% healthy for every game. And looking at the playoff tree as we get ready for the league championship series, once again, there were 3 sweeps. We took out the Cardinals 3-0. Nationals took out the Marlins 3-0. Red Sox took out the Yankees 3-0. And the White Sox got by the Twins in 4 games. So the 4 top teams in baseball are the 4 top teams alive here, as we are 1 step away from the 2053 World Series. And as we get ready for our first game against the Nationals with the setback, Bobby Perez still going to be banged up with that strained back for a couple days. Still minimal impact on hitting and throwing, moderate impact on running. So probably going to keep him out of the starting lineup, but we're not going to avoid potentially using him as a pinch hitter. We're not going to restrict his usage from that way. Dave Alvarado back on the mound for us. We've got our number 1 starter. And we're going up against Hector Rios, 27-year-old ground baller, so he should be pretty effective in Colorado. Doesn't have the best movement on his pitches and did give up 31 homers this year in 205 and 2/3 innings after leading the league with 32 homers allowed last year and 34 the year before. So he was 14-8 with a 3.98 ERA, 3.27 SIERA. So a pretty solid pitcher, but I think our hope is certainly that maybe we can knock a couple balls out of the ballpark against him. He's a right-hander, so we should be fine just keeping the same lineup that we had before against righties with Hector Rivera in while we're dealing with the injury to Mr. Perez. We were only 4-3 against Washington this year, so we did have a winning record against them, as I imagine we did against just about every team. But this is certainly looking on paper like a much more significant challenge than the Cardinals proved to be. Nationals were second in the league in runs scored. Now, granted, they were 141 runs behind us, but they still had the second best offense in the league and a respectable pitching staff that was 6th overall. So, as I said, this looks on paper or on a computer screen like a much more challenging matchup for the Rockies than the Cardinals series was. We'll see if we can get it off to a good start now. And we got it off to a great start, 15-1 victory. Looks like we did hit 6 home runs, so we definitely, I'm assuming, hit some of those off of Rios. Eddie Farley, Demetrius Washington, Robbie Carrillo, a couple from Adam Fields, and Hector Rivera in the lineup also with 1-2. So can't ask for much better than that, 15-1 victory. So thus far through 4 games, the Rockies have only allowed 3 runs. Once again, jumped out early with 7 runs in the first 2 innings. They got 1 in the 6th. We came back with 7 in the 7th, and then another 1 in the 8th. So a pretty dominant performance for Colorado. Fields with the 2 home runs drove in 6. Got 3 ribbies from Carrillo. Danny Ruiz and Eddie Farley each scored 3 runs. Hector Rivera was 1 for 5. Continues to leave a lot of batters on base. Hopefully we'll have Perez back in the lineup in the not-so-distant future. The pitching was obviously good. Alvarado, 6 hits and a walk over 7 1/3. Victor Fields only allowed 1 walk over an inning and 2/3. So an excellent start to this NLCS for our Colorado Rockies. And unfortunately, it looks like another setback for Bobby Perez. Going to be another 4 days until he's ready to play again. So definitely, to use one of my catchphrases, or I guess my only catchphrase, not optimal, that we are going to be without Bobby Perez again. We've got Jose Vasquez on the mound, left-hander. Talked about him already, 13-7 this year with a 4.12 ERA. Perfect pitcher for Colorado. Going up against Steve Nava, 23-year-old, so a youngster, started the year in Rochester and then came up. He was 6-8 with 11 saves, so started 16 games, closed out 11, 4.58 ERA over 110 innings pitched, only 94 hits allowed, but 68 walks and 16 home runs. His control is below average, his movement only a little bit above average. Another right-hander that we'll be facing. I would think this pitching matchup, once again, favors us, and the goal is certainly to be going to D.C. with a 2-0 lead. Unfortunately, that's not the case. 8-7 victory for the Nationals. So after going 9-0 in the playoffs at home last year and starting this year with a 3-0 record in the playoffs, the dominance of Coors Field in Colorado for the Rockies has finally been damaged. Looks like Elijah Smith, the rookie in relief, took the loss. Did get another homer from Adam Fields, who's having himself a nice playoff run, but was a 14-inning game. Wow. So they took the lead in the 9th, 7-5. We came back with 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th to tie it. Scoreless after that, and then they got a run off of us in the 14th. So definitely a painful loss to lose at home in 14 innings. Rivera continues to be a problem in right field, not hitting much at all. We may have to make a change there, even if we're facing a right-handed pitcher in the next game. He just hasn't provided much offense. Either has Jordan Casares. So definitely could see some changes to our lineup to hopefully generate a little more offense while not totally destroying our defense. Vasquez was respectable, 3 earned runs over 5 innings after his brilliant start against the Cardinals. Will Lucio blew a save. Vargas came in as a lefty specialist and looks like he struck out the one batter he faced. Arabamge got an inning and a third out of him. Javi Toledo came on. Looks like he was the one who gave up the 2 runs in the top of the 9th. Or maybe not. Yeah, he could have still done that. He gave up that, and then he stuck in after that and kept things close for a couple innings after that. Chase Crawford then came in, and then finally went to the rookie Elijah Smith, who gave up 1 hit and 1 walk and 1 run. But it proved to be the losing run of the game. Demetrius Washington, in the losing effort, was player of the game. 4 for 5, 2 runs scored, 3 ribbies. But definitely a disappointment to lose a game at home. Definitely don't want to be giving up home field advantage. But I do think that even though Rivera is, not Rivera, even though Bobby Perez is still banged up, may look to, he's going to still be banged up for 4 days, so may look to get Rivera out of the lineup, just not hitting much. Has that one home run, which I guess counts for something, but between him and Jordan Casares, those are two guys that just aren't generating much offense, as you can see from our playoff totals here. Who are obviously not going to take Elijah Moore out of the lineup. Have a lot more confidence that he will get things going offensively than those other two players. So have some decisions to make depending on what the pitching matchup ends up being in the Game 3 matchup in Washington. And taking a look at the Game 3 matchup, we got Gus Duran, who had that great game for us in the third game against the Cardinals, the clincher, going up against Nelson Escobedo, another right-hander. Looks like a solid pitcher, about to turn 30, was 15-8 this year with a 4.23 ERA for the Nationals, exact same ERA he put up a year ago. So a good solid pitcher. But would think that the pitching matchup probably favors us on the margins. But a couple of veterans on the mound. We are going to modify the lineup a bit. I don't want to totally sacrifice defense, but I have not been impressed with what we've gotten from Casares and Rivera thus far in the playoffs. And looking at our team, we did put Israel Mays back into the lineup as our starting shortstop against right-handers, although he's not quite as good defensively as Jordan Casares. He's still a good defensive player, and he is a much better bat, potentially. So we put him in. We are going to keep Hector Rivera in right field for the time being, just don't have any other real options. He did hit the one homer for us. Maybe he can luck into another home run here in games 3 or 4 or 5 on the road in Washington before hopefully we'll have Mr. Perez back for any games that end up in Colorado. So we're ready for a pivotal Game 3 in Washington. A couple veterans on the mound, as I mentioned. Let's see if we can take the lead in the series back. And we do with a 9-2 victory. Got homers from Demetrius Washington, Adam Fields homers for the third straight game, and center fielder Israel Mays with a homer. So definitely glad to see that win. We jumped out to 3-0 lead, added 3 more in the 5th. They came back with 2 in the 6th, and then we added 3 in the 7th. So it was a pretty dominant win for Washington. Israel Mays definitely provided us with some offense, 3 for 5 with 4 ribbies, and Rivera finally broke out going 3 for 5 also. So good to see a little bit of offense at the back end of the batting order there. Demetrius Washington continues to have an excellent series, as we've talked about. Looking at the pitching, Duran with a quality start, 6 hits and a walk, 2 runs over 6 1/3. Latrell Young came on and gave us 2 1/3 innings, and then Adebamge got the last out for us. So Israel Mays back into the starting lineup, gets the player of the game. He had been our starting shortstop pretty much ever since we had picked him up. As we headed into the playoffs, manager Nick Hartman checked in with him, and he wanted to change the lineup to, at least against right-handers, get the slightly better defense of Casares into the lineup, so we deferred to him till we lost a game. But Casares just wasn't putting up much offense, and we were constantly facing right-handed pitchers thus far, so we wanted to get Mays back into the lineup, and so far it's paid off. And so we head to Game 4 of this NLCS. The win yesterday guaranteed that we'd have at least one more game in Colorado. If we can win today, that will guarantee that if we do end up going back to Colorado, we'll have a lead in the series when we go there, which would be nice. Jose Ortega finally gets to make his playoff debut for this year. All he did was go 19-3, led the National League in wins with a 3.82 ERA. So the fact that somebody like that is our 4th starter in the playoffs, I think, is a testament to the strength of our rotation. player that we picked up at the trade deadline the season before this one with Milwaukee, and I think he's going to be a big member of our staff for the next couple of seasons. Going up against Franklin Renteria, pretty good Colorado pitcher, quite honestly, with his ground ball tendencies and the good movement on his pitches, but the stuff and the control are not exceptional. Does have a varied 6-pitch arsenal, which is pretty rare to see. So I think he's probably a pretty effective starter. Split the year between St. Louis and Washington. Guy who was claimed on waivers. Interesting. Don't really understand why the Cardinals would have waived him. He was 4-2 with a 3.58 ERA for them. Was a reasonably productive pitcher, certainly above average. Sierra wasn't great, but he joined Washington, went 8-5 with a 3.62 ERA. So he's been certainly respectable for both teams, and looks like St. Louis probably could have used him in the playoff series against us, but unfortunately for them, they moved on. Going to keep our lineup the same and see if we can try to start putting a little bit of a stranglehold on this series by hopefully getting a win here in Game 4. And we do get a 3-0 win. Ortega would assume was pretty good to get the W. Got a save from Javi Toledo. No home runs, so the streak of home runs by Adam Fields finally comes to an end. Scored 2 in the first, 1 in the fourth, and only allowed 4 hits over the course of the game. Got runs driven in by Ruiz, and that was our only ribby. So how did we score the runs? Single and a double by Elijah Moore. Oh no, Elijah Moore hit into a double play. Okay, interesting. So yeah, only 1 run driven in by Ruiz. Great pitching performance from Ortega, as we've talked about. 4 hits, 1 walk, no runs over 7 1/3. Javi Toledo only allowed 1 walk over an inning and 2/3 to pick up his 3rd save of the playoffs. And our hope is that we don't have another setback from Bobby Perez. And if we can get past this next game, it'll give him even more time to rest. But even if Washington does beat us here in the upcoming Game 5, as long as there's not a setback, I think we will have Perez back for any games that need to be played in Colorado, which would certainly be a positive development for us, as much as I enjoy seeing what the youngster Rivera can do for us. Would certainly prefer to have Bobby Perez in the lineup because he has a proven major league bat at this point. In Game 5 is a rematch of Game 1, which we won 15-1 in Colorado. Hopefully we can do something like that again. Clearly a very different environment in Washington, but would love to get this series over now and then have a few days to rest and recover before finding out who we would potentially be playing in the World Series. Not to be the case, though, a 3-2 win. So we're going to be going back to Colorado. We are up 3-2, and we've got 2 games at home coming up, so not the worst position to be in, but certainly would have loved to clinch things on the road, get a little more rest, and not have the pressure of still needing to win another game. Taking a look at the box score, we took a 2-0 lead. Oh, they came back with a run in the 4th, and then they tied us in the 9th before scoring in the 11th to win. So not an optimal situation there. Looks like, yeah, Toledo with the blown save, unfortunately. Alvarado was really good. 1 earned run over 6 2/3 innings. Atabamge and Vargas kept the Nationals from scoring, but Toledo blow the save, and then Crawford got the loss in the 11th. So hate to waste a good pitching performance like that, like we ultimately did with Alvarado, but it is what it is at this point. Rivera, another 0-for, struck out, left 4 men on base. Looks like Bobby Perez did pinch hit. Certainly would love to get him back full time into the lineup. So hopefully no further setbacks with his injury. Looks like he is now considered healthy. So we'll have pretty much the full roster hopefully back for these final potentially 2 games in Colorado. Obviously, the hope is that we've only got 1 game left in this series. And we will have Bobby Perez back in leading off for us. And we did overrule our manager. We're going to bench Casares at short and ensure that Israel Mays gets the playing time there. I think that he gives us a better bat. So hopefully we can get this one clinched before going to a deciding Game 7. This is a matchup that didn't work out for us last time at home. We lost 8-7, as you may remember, in that 14-inning epic game. The hope is that Jose Vasquez can outpitch Steve Nava today. Not to be the case, though. We are going to a Game 7 as Nava strikes out 13. So these Washington Nationals are tough to beat. We did get homers from Ortega and 2 from Perez in his return. Looks like Toledo struggled again in the bullpen. So another game that went to extra innings, and we scored 3 in the 8th to make it tied at 5-5, but gave up 2 runs in the 10th inning. So Vasquez was not great. Will Lucio was okay in relief. And then Javi Toledo looks like he pitched fine in the 9th, but in the 10th they got to him. 2 earned runs, 3 hits, and we could not come back to score any runs. Did get, as I mentioned, the 2 solo homers from Bobby Perez. Ortega drove in 3 runs, including the home run that he hit, which was a 3-run shot. So homers accounted for all of our offense, but Steve Nava was dominant with 13 strikeouts over 6 1/3 innings. So we could not do anything against the Nationals, or we could not do much against the Nationals except those 3 home runs. But we couldn't do enough against the Nationals. And because of that, we are headed to a deciding Game 7 here in the National League Championship Series. And as we get ready for a Game 7, Toledo is tired, so I don't think we want him closing. We are going to move, in case we do need a closer, Tawase Adebamge into that closer role for us. We're going to actually move Toledo just into long relief. Hopefully we won't need him, but certainly don't want to be having a tired pitcher in a potentially pressure situation for us. So who knows whether we'll need a closer or not, but Adebamge has been good in the playoffs for us, admittedly in less high-profile roles than potentially closing out a Game 7 of the playoffs. But definitely with Toledo being tired, want someone who's fresh to go. And you can see Adebamge hasn't pitched in 3 days at this point. So hopefully we don't even need a closer. And hopefully it's a dominant game for us. Gus Giron, who's been excellent in the playoffs, going up against Nelson Escobedo. This is a matchup that we won 9-2 in Game 3. And we hit a bunch of home runs, 3 of them that day. Certainly looking at Escobedo, he's an extreme fly ball pitcher with decent movement on his pitches, but not exceptional. Would think that we can hopefully hit some balls out of the park, or at least into the gaps in Colorado against him. And we do get another big victory, 11-3. So the Rockies are off to a second consecutive appearance in the World Series. It was definitely a more challenging matchup against the Nationals that we had hoped. We did know that was a 99-win team. They were the second best team in the National League all year, and we were only 4-3 against them in the regular season. And fortunately for us, we were able to duplicate that 4-3 against them in this NLCS. You can see we did get a couple homers from Elijah Moore, one from Bobby Perez, and one from Israel Mays. So we were able to take some advantage of Escobedo. Take a look at the box score. They actually jumped out to a lead on us in the first. We chipped back with runs in the second, fourth, and fifth to take the lead, and then really broke things open with 4 runs each in the 7th and the 8th. 6 runs driven in by Elijah Moore with those 2 home runs. So a monster game for the excellent first baseman. All he did this year, as we've already talked about, is lead the National League with 61 home runs while hitting 300 and driving in 133 runs. So he has been an incredible addition to our team over the last few years. Jerron, excellent again. He hasn't quite, or he doesn't at least have the pitching profile of Rogelio Loera. When you look at his ratings and the performance over the course of his career. But certainly at this point now, with a 3-0 record and a 1.69 ERA through his 3 playoff starts, is doing everything we would have hoped to get from the likes of a Rogelio Loera, including his 9 strikeouts today. Victor Fields came in and cleaned up at the end. 2 innings pitched, did allow a run. Elijah Moore, player of the game. Adam Fields ties the NL playoff game record with 3 doubles. And Bobby Perez, once again injured while running the bases. Fortunately, a bruised wrist, only 1 day, so we should have him back at full health for the World Series. But he has been constantly injuring himself, most often while out on the base paths. So that's been a little disappointing. You can see the White Sox with a 3-2 lead over the Red Sox at this point. So we will find out which color Sox we will be facing off against in the World Series shortly. And the Chicago White Sox outlasted the Red Sox in an ALCS that also went to 7 games. So a couple of epic championship series, and there is definitely potential for this to be an epic series. The 2 best teams in baseball are 113-win Rockies against the 103-win White Sox. You can see they had a home record of 63-18 that was the same as ours. So they were a dominant team at home. We split the season series with them, and the White Sox had the best offense in the American League and also the best pitching in the American League. So they were every bit as dominant as our Rockies were over the course of this season. So it looks like it's going to be an excellent series between the 2 best teams in baseball, and wouldn't want it any other way. If our Rockies are going to prove to be a team of destiny and win a back-to-back championship, they're going to be doing it against the best team that we could have been going up against in those mighty White Sox. We have got our ace back on the mound, Dave Alvarado, for the first game here in Colorado. Going to be going up against Jose Luna, brilliant 23-year-old, went 15-7 this year, struck out 281 batters in 204 2/3 innings, 4.31 ERA, but only a 2.29 batting average against him, and put up an impressive 2.32 SIERA. Doesn't have a ton of movement on his pitches and did give up 30 home runs. But you look at that 3-pitch arsenal, and he is clearly a dominant pitcher. And amazingly, Jose Luna is someone who lasted to the 17th round in 2047. So that was an incredible draft pick by the White Sox to pick up somebody like that there. You can see he's considered the number 7 prospect in baseball. Odds are he's going to be striking out a lot of our batters. The hope is that we can hit a couple balls out of the park against him, and that we can also get a good pitching performance from Dave Alvarado here in Game 1 and get this World Series of 2053 off to a good start for our Rockies. Not to be the case, though. 8-7 loss. Looks like we got into the bullpen where Atabamge took the loss for us. Bunch of home runs from Chicago. 2 from Simpson, 1 from Ortiz, Escobar, Vargas, Ekstrom, and Medina. So 7 home runs by the White Sox. We did get 4 from Farley, Carrillo, Moore, and Perez, but not enough. So we are already up against it. And they took an early lead. We tied them. They took the lead right back, and we took it back from them. But then they chipped away at our bullpen, presumably with a run in the 6th, and then 3 in the 8th. bunch of solo home runs, obviously, from the team. Actually, Alvarado was not good. 5 earned runs over 5 2/3. Latrell Young, not good. Adebamge, not good. Toledo stabilized things when he came on in the ninth, but too little, too late at that point for us. So Jose Medina, the hero of the game with his multiple home, or only one home run, I guess, 3 for 4 with a run driven in, scored 2 runs. So a rough start to the World Series for our Colorado Rockies. And certainly as we prepare for Game 2 here, with the fact that we know the White Sox were as dominant at home this year as we were in Colorado, feel like it's a must-win game for the Rockies. We've got Jose Ortega on the mound, going to be going up against Danny Serrano. 30-year-old, was 13-7 with a 4.19 ERA this year. Decent movement on his pitches, neutral tendencies. Again, hopefully this matchup favors us, and hopefully we can get some home runs today and at least even up this series before we have to head on to the road. And we do get an 8-5 victory. Only 1 home run from the catcher, Alex Alvarez. They hit 2 more against us, so it looks like that vaunted Chicago offense thus far has been enjoying playing in Colorado, where they've hit 9 home runs against us in 2 games. The fact that we actually won one of those games, giving up 9 home runs in 2 games, maybe a small victory for us. 7 runs in the first inning, so the Rockies came out angry and made up for losing that first game. Looks like again in the 9th inning, I don't even know whether that would have been Toledo with the lead that we had, but it was Toledo. Actually, Toledo came on and got the save after looks like some combination of Smith and Adebamge at the beginning of the inning put on some runners. Looks like we did have an error from Israel Mays and a couple errors from catcher Alex Alvarez, so those runs at the end were unearned. Robbie Carrillo ejected for arguing a strike call. Hopefully no suspension there. I guess despite the 2 errors, Alex Alvarez redeemed himself by going 2 for 4 with 2 ribbies, including that home run in the first. Doesn't look like it was the prettiest game ever for our Rockies, but we did what we need to do. We had to get that game. Could not be going down to Chicago 2-0 against a team like this on their home turf. Certainly, they still have the opportunity, if they take 3 in a row, to keep us from ever playing another game at home this year, but at least we are even with them as we are heading east to the Windy City. So as we get ready for a pivotal Game 3 in Colorado, we've got Jose Vasquez on the mound, who's been good in the playoffs. They come with a familiar face, Andres Eretzeri, who's been really good this year, although his record is only 1-2 in the playoffs. That 1.65 ERA is certainly impressive. We talked about him earlier, pitcher that came up through Colorado. We're looking at postseason stats rather than regular season, but he spent over a decade in Colorado till we moved on from him in his mid-30s, and he has certainly been good since we moved on from him. Was kind of a casualty of his injury proneness and a big salary when we decided to move on from him, but certainly has remained a very effective pitcher. So we'll see if Eretzeri can get some revenge on the Rockies for moving on from him in Game 3, or will the Rockies be able to prove that maybe it was the right decision here in Chicago? And Eretzeri is a lefty. We haven't faced too many lefties in the playoffs in this run so far, so we'll have a little bit of a different lineup in there. See what we can do against the veteran Eretzeri. And Colorado with a win. Does look like Vasquez is done for the year with a sore elbow, moderate impact for 3 to 4 weeks. Saw that pop up quickly there. Hopefully we don't need him in a Game 7 because that would definitely hurt us. 5-3 victory. We got a homer from Bobby Perez. They got homers from Shipman, Ortiz, and Ashby. But a big win to take a 2-1 series lead. They scored in the first. We came back in the second and then hit 4 runs in the third to really break things open. Offensively, not a monster performance. I did mention the homer from Perez. That was his only hit. Also got ribbies from Carrillo, Washington, Mays, and Alvarez. Vasquez, he only went 2 1/3 innings, got hurt there. So it looks like his season is done. Defense remains a problem for us. Elijah Moore and Alex Ortega both making errors today. Felt like our defense had been pretty solid this season, but has let us down the last couple games. But fortunately, we've won both of those games. Elijah Smith on in relief gets the W. Will Lucio and Juan Vargas with holds. And then Javi Toledo with his 5th save of the playoffs went 2 innings for us. Definitely not great that Jose Vasquez is injured and out. We will see if we can think about how we want to set up this team, because obviously we used a lot of pitchers in this game, and we do also need to be thinking about what we could potentially do in the pitching staff for a 5th game starter if we do end up needing somebody, with the fact that he's now out for the season. And we've been thinking about pitching. I don't think we're going to make preparations for a Game 7 right now. No guarantees even that we're going to get to a Game 7 even at this point. So I think we just hope that we continue to hopefully win at least one more game in Colorado, and that we can go back, or one more game in Chicago, and that we can go back to Colorado with a lead. If we're able to clinch in a Game 6, wonderful. If we have to piece things together in a Game 7, that's kind of the fate that we've been dealt at this point. Right now, the goal is certainly to win one of these last 2 games in Colorado to ensure, in Chicago. Why do I keep saying that? One of these last 2 games in Chicago, right in front of me there, to see if we can go back to Colorado with at least a lead. Gus Giron, who's been brilliant in these playoffs, on the mound for us in Game 4, going to be going up against David Lara, 18-5 this year with a 3.56 ERA. Certainly another very good pitching matchup between the 2 best teams in baseball, and 2 pitchers who have been brilliant in the playoffs. Neither has had a loss yet, and they both have ERAs in the 1s. So something may have to give today in Game 4, and our hope is clearly that it ends up in our favor. But not to be the case. 4-3 win. Lara outpitches Giron. Bill Gonzalez on for a save. Did get a homer from Israel Mays. They got a couple more home runs. So they continue to out-homer us every game in this series, which is a little surprising given the offense that we have. So things are tied 2-2 now. Pivotal Game 5 tomorrow in Colorado for both teams, obviously. Chicago scored a couple runs early to get the lead. We did come back with 2 in the 9th to try to make it close, but was not to be the case. Giron pitched respectably, gave us 7 1/3 innings, did give up 4 earned runs. His ERA went up to 2.51, took his first loss of the playoffs. Lara remains undefeated. Shocking news. Bobby Perez injured while throwing the ball. So mild calf strain with 1 week of recovery time. Minimal influence on his running. Bobby Perez through these playoffs has just been a physical disaster. Just little things, running the base paths, trying to throw the ball, taking their toll on him over the course of this playoff run. So I don't want to be too dramatic, but this Game 5 could very well decide the World Series. Clearly, either team's going to want to have a 3-2 lead before we head back to Colorado. Would certainly be feeling confident if we win this one that we can get a W in Colorado. Clearly would like it to be a 6-game series if we end up winning it, to avoid having to piece together a starting rotation or a starting pitching staff, or more accurately, a pitcher to start that final potential 7th game of the series in the final game of the season. But we're going to throw everything we can at trying to win today, and then we've got a game off tomorrow, and then another day on the 26th. So we should be able to kind of at least scope out who we might want that potential pitcher in a Game 7 to be after this one, but certainly would prefer to be making that decision from a position of strength, winning this game. A couple of undefeated pitchers in the playoffs on the mound, Alvarado and Luna. The White Sox beat us 8-7 in this matchup the first time around. The hope is that we can turn the tables on them here in Game 5. We do get a 4-2 win, so a big road win to give us a 3-2 lead. Alvarado with the win, Luna with the loss, Toledo with the save. He has saved every game that we have won here in this World Series so far. We finally out-homer them. Got homers from Moore, Ortega, and Perez. They only had 2, Escobar and Ekstrom. Taking a look at the box score, both teams scored in the first. We scored 2 in the 5th and 1 in the 6th to take the lead, and then we held them off. As we talked about, we got the 3 home runs, which accounted for the majority of our offense. Looks like all of the... not all of the ribbies. It looks like all of the home runs were solo. So Elijah Moore also gave us an additional run batted in. That did not occur on his home run. Dave Alvarado, 2 earned runs over 7 2/3 innings, improves to 3-0 in the playoffs. Javi Toledo with his 6th save of the playoffs, as we talked about, his 3rd of the World Series. Gave up a hit and a walk over 1 1/3 innings, but got the job done. And now we head back to Colorado with a 3-2 lead, but we still do have the potential, if we do end up needing to go to a Game 7, who is going to start for us. And that is the big decision that we're going to need to think about between now and Game 6. And if we do need a pitcher in Game 7, we've decided it's going to be Chase Crawford. He was on the IL a couple times this year. Pitched only 14 1/3 innings at the major league level, but you can see he has not pitched recently, so he should be fully rest. Has enough stamina to hopefully give us 4 or 5 innings, and would be coming in on full rest. And he also does have a good profile for pitching in Colorado. So the hope is that we don't need Mr. Crawford to pitch in a Game 7. But if we do get to a Game 7, we're going to, as I said, put him into the rotation now to ensure that he is not used in a Game 6. And he will be on the mound for us if we can't clinch things today against the White Sox. But the goal is obviously to win things today in Game 6 and see if we truly are a team of destiny after a 113-win regular season. We've got Jose Ortega on the mound, 2-0 in the playoffs with a 2.02 ERA, so feel like that's a good spot for us. They've got Danny Serrano on the mound, does have good movement on his pitches. Neutral tendencies. Again, the hope is that now that we are back home in Colorado, we can be hitting more home runs than our opponents, and would love to get this clinched before having to try to piece together a game against Eritzeri in Game 7 tomorrow. That would certainly be poetic justice if the former Colorado star tried to win a World Series for his opponent in Game 7 in Colorado. But as nice as a story as that would potentially be, my hope is that we don't get to the point where that becomes a potential issue, because Eritzeri does have a good profile for pitching in Colorado. And as we've talked about, we are down a pitcher at this point following the injury to Vasquez. So the goal is to win it today. And we got the job done. 13-8 victory for the Colorado Rockies. Toledo with the win in relief after saving the first 3 wins of the series. The White Sox once again just hitting home runs against us. They got 4 of them. They out-homered us. No, they didn't out-homer us because we got 4 also with 2 from Elijah Moore, who ended up being named the World Series MVP. So the Colorado Rockies take the 2053 World Series 4-2 over the Chicago White Sox. Back-to-back World Series championships for the Colorado Rockies, and put a cherry on top of the sundae that was their 113-win regular season. They joined the New York Yankees as the only major league teams who have ever won more than 110 games, who have also gone on to win the World Series. So a satisfying conclusion from our perspective to this historic run by the Rockies. They are now back-to-back World Series champions. Chicago took a lead in the first inning. We came back with 5 runs in the 3rd and 4th, but then they bounced back with 5 runs in the 5th and 6th. Really took until the 8th inning until we kind of broke things open. The game was tied at 8-8 heading into the bottom of the 5th, and the Rockies scored 5 runs in the bottom of the 5th. 2-run homer from Gonzalez and a 2-run double by center fielder Eddie Farley. The top of the 8th was Gonzalez. Two-run double by Eddie Farley in the bottom of 8th was the big move there. Elijah Moore with a grand slam in the 3rd accounted for all 4 of those runs. Moore ended up with 6 ribbies. You can see for the playoffs overall, 6 home runs, 16 runs driven in. So a great run by this Colorado team. Ortega was not great. 5 earned runs over 5 innings. Latrell Young came in and blew the save. 2 earned runs over 2 1/3. And Javi Toledo also blew a save with a run over an inning and 2/3. Ended up 1-1 in the playoffs, or 1-1 in this series, more accurately, with the 6 total saves. So we were able to piece together relief that was good enough to get us through. Elijah Moore, as we talked about, not just the player of the game, but the 2053 World Series most valuable player. So the Rockies have completed their quest. They are the 2053 World Series champions. Was definitely a battle to get here, going to 7 games against the Nationals and then outlasting the second best team in baseball, the White Sox, in 6 games. But when all was said and done, we do now have back-to-back titles in Colorado and have completed the destiny of the 113-win regular season. So a satisfying conclusion for the Rockies. We will be back in our next episode to take a full look at all of the top performers during the regular season and the postseason, recap everything that happened with this team of destiny, and then also start jumping into the big decisions that we're going to have to make in this offseason. And the biggest in terms of the dollars is Rogelio Loera and that huge team option we have for $36 million. Given the fact that he's still out another 8 months with that ruptured UCL, and he's now 41 years old, I think our decision is pretty obvious. We are going to move on from the superstar. Robbie Carrillo, actually the option for him won't be till after this season, so that's not a huge decision there. But clearly we are in a, despite winning 2 straight championships, we are in a somewhat precarious financial situation with no money available for free agents right now. We will have about $11 million for extensions, assuming our budget remains where it is. You would think that a extreme winning priority owner is going to be real happy with 2 straight championships. He does, however, want us to increase profits by the end of next year, and we're going to have lost $28 million this year. Again, my expectation is that since his priority is extreme winning, even despite the significant loss this year. Hopefully we will get a better budget or a larger budget, or at least not have our budget cut, but no guarantees about that. So we will officially make our decision on Loera in the next episode. We'll find out where we stand as far as our budget. We'll take a look at all of the top performers, and we will start getting ready for salary arbitration in the offseason. So it's going to be a busy episode next time around, but we're going to be going into it at least from a position of strength and feeling good about what we've done with the Rockies with a second consecutive world title in Colorado. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.